The phrase any given Sunday exists for a reason. We'll tell you what the Bills need to do to avoid an upset and what the Saints must do to hand the Bills their first loss of the season. Crossover Thursday starts now.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into this Crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Bills and Locked On Saints. We are proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And of course, wanted to extend a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Ross Jackson, the outstanding host of Locked On Saints. We're here to get you ready for Week 4 when the Saints travel to Orchard Park to face the Bills, a battle of 3-0 against 0-3. Ross, welcome in. Excited to break this football game down with you.
Yeah, man, I think this is going to be a really interesting one, and excited to break it down with you. I had this one circled as the season began, not even just about the game, but just because I got to do a show with you. We don't get to do these very often.
I know it's once every 8 years. Is that how this goes?
Right,
unless you get the random one-off opponent. Last time these two teams played was Thanksgiving, if I'm not mistaken, right? So that was down in New Orleans. This time up in Orchard Park, where you have a Bills team that's kind of doing what they're supposed to, and the Saints that are kind of doing what they're supposed to as well. Although I thought the first 2 weeks of the season, that's a football team that looked a little bit more competitive than you thought. And then last week against Seattle, looks like there was some issues there. What's the big storyline for the Saints entering this one?
Yeah, I think the big thing is trying to bounce back from that very performance you just mentioned over in Seattle. That looked like a team that was indeed sleepless in Seattle before taking the football field. That was not a very good start for them. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Punt and return touchdown, blocked punt, missed field goal, interception that got called back. Like nothing went well for the New Orleans Saints in that game up against the Seattle Seahawks. They went in down 32 points. It's just the largest halftime deficit for that football team since 2005, Joe, two decades. Wow. And so that was a struggle of a game for them. And so this week is all about bouncing back. And that bounce back doesn't necessarily have to mean beating the Super Bowl contender Buffalo Bills. But certainly if they look any shade of competitive in Orchard Park, I think that's going to reflect positively on first-year head coach Kellen Moore and this New Orleans Saints team as they continue to embark upon their rebuild.
So one-score losses in week 1 and 2 against the Cardinals in San Francisco, both those games at home in New Orleans. What about those games maybe allowed the Saints to compete in ways that maybe some didn't expect?
Yeah, I think a big part of it was that they didn't give up touchdowns on either quick or hidden possessions. And so the special teams touchdowns or the big returns, the losing of the hidden yardage game, all those things reared their ugly head up against Seattle in a way that they didn't against Arizona and San Francisco. Arizona and San Francisco were a little bit more about playing against the team that they were playing against, even though they still shot themselves in the foot a little bit. Seattle was a little bit more about them playing against the team they were playing against and playing against themselves as well. They really contributed to beating themselves in Seattle. And so I think that was a big part of it. And the other thing that I would, I guess, highlight as a part of it too is just the explosive plays, or really not even the explosive plays, Joe, but just the quick possessions that Seattle was able to turn in. 7 straight possessions in which they had a score, and many of those were 6 or fewer plays per drive, per scoring drive. And so a lot of that had to do with the starting field position that they had, a blocked punt that leads to a red zone possession right away, a 60-yard kick return that leads to a favorable field position. I think it's all of those things. And so this was altogether a 3-phase failure, whereas maybe the first 2 games, there was maybe a little bit of a dip in the defense in week 2. There was a little bit of a struggle on offense in week 1. This game up against Seattle was just a failure at all 3 levels, and that's always going to be really hard to combat, and it's always going to look ugly on a scoreboard.
I'm sure a big bounce back opportunity. Maybe they don't win this game, but like you said, they compete, and those types of games can be foundational, right, for a team, a young team under Kellen Moore. That I'm sure there's a lot of coachable moments that he's been working through this week. Ross, when it comes to the Bills side of this game and the big story, everybody's talking third down defense. And the reason is because that's what we talked about all last year. It was an issue for this Bills team. Bills were awesome last year, right? They go to the AFC Championship game. They pushed Kansas City to the brink. Probably could have won the game, but it wasn't because their third down defense was any good. It was a problem. It was 29th in the NFL last year. And now it's still not performing well. They gave up 44% of third downs last year. They're at 43% so far this year, and that's heavily influenced by week 2 against the Jets, where the Jets were 0 for 11 converting third down. So if you go to Baltimore in week 1, where the Bills gave up 6 of 11 on third down, you go to last week against Miami, 10 of 15, and you realize you still have a third down problem. That's 62% against Miami and Baltimore. The good news, you got the Dolphins into 15 third downs. The bad news is you couldn't get off the field 10 times. And that's a major concern. And there's a lot that's coming for this Bills defense in terms of reinforcements. They're going to get Ed Oliver back and Matt Milano back and their first-round pick, Maxwell Harrison back. And they have some suspended players, and Michael Hoyt and Larry Ogunjobi that are part of this. There's been some new schematic elements for this Bills defense. They're playing 3 linebackers way more than ever under Sean McDermott. They're stunting more. There's some pressure looks that they haven't really shown before. So they're kind of evolving into a different style of defense, and they're shorthanded in some ways, but third downs are going to be a talking point until they're not a talking point. So you have not a great story to tell about how this has turned around year over year. So expectations are high for this third down defense on Sunday against the Saints, and of course, moving forward throughout the course of the season.
Joe, do you find that it is truly the third down defense that's been an issue, or is it them losing on first and second down and allowing teams into favorable third down situations that has kind of been the issue for them? Because there's a similar story here in New Orleans, but it's kind of told a different way. So I'm just curious about where sort of the first and second down defense is and how that reflects the third down defense in Buffalo.
Well, against Miami, they had Miami in so many third and longs that they just couldn't get off the field. And so I think at its core is not being able to consistently marry the pass rush with the coverage. And you got to have it. You got to have it. I thought that's kind of been at the crux of what the biggest issue is for Buffalo's third down defense is those things haven't married up well. And that's why I think you get excited about what's coming back because those players directly improve those areas of the team. But, you know, it's been a lot of third and longs that makes it very disappointing, especially you're going up against Tua. Tua's holding on to the ball.
And
he's finding
throwing the ball
outside. He's finding the space outside the numbers. So
Right. He's not pushing very far. It's very similar in New Orleans. New Orleans is over 45% in terms of third down conversion rate allowed over on the defensive side. And a lot of it is third and longs. They're a better third and short team than they are a third and long team. So I was curious about where that ranked. They're a better third and short team than they are a better third and long team. And so I was curious about maybe where that's at for Buffalo as well. But if they're having trouble with third and longs too, then maybe the sustaining of drives might be really important for both of these teams, right? You're trying to keep each of these defenses off the field a little bit.
Yeah, no question about that. And if the pass rush and coverage isn't synced up against the Saints, well, they got some speed at receiver that could go a long way in deciding who wins this game. We're going to break down the matchups that will decide this game here on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with us. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Folks, check this out. Right now, new customers, you can bet just $5. And if that bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because I can bet however I want, whether that's spreads, over-unders, player props, same-game parlays. You can even jump in live with the live betting as the action unfolds. It just makes these games even more exciting to watch, whether it's your favorite team, your fantasy lineup, or just watching football on a Sunday. And there's some spicy stuff to check out in this Bills-Saints game. The spread, Bills are favored by 16.5. I know that there's high expectations for the Bills in this game, but this is still NFL football. That's a big spread. Maybe you like that. How about the over-under, Ross? I thought this was pretty interesting. The over-under is 48.5. That's the second highest projection of any game this week. So are you ready to play? Check it out, folks. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. When you think game day, you might not think Wayfair, but you should, because Wayfair is the best kept secret for incredible and affordable game day finds. Wayfair has everything you need to get your space ready this season, whether you're tailgating outdoors or cheering from your living room. And honestly, my wife and I, we just redid our packed patio. We extended it, so we had a little extra space. And my wife, she loves the outdoor TV. I love cooking outside. We needed some furniture. We went right to Wayfair. The selection was awesome. The pricing is incredible. We found everything that we wanted, and the delivery, it's fast, it's hassle-free, it's free. All of that's a lifesaver, especially when you want to get stuff in place before kickoff. So check it out, folks. Wayfair is your trusted destination for all things game day, from coolers and grills to recliners and slow cookers. Shop, save, and score today at wayfair.com. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Joe Marino from Locked On Bills, Ross Jackson from Locked On Saints here to get you ready for Week 4. Bills Saints in Orchard Park. We want to talk matchups that will decide this game. And Ross, you look at this Saints team, looking for an upset, looking to improve. Where does your mind go when it comes to matchups that are going to dictate this outcome?
Yeah, I'll start with what is one of the more obvious matchups that always seems to come up, but is big for this matchup in particular, or this game in particular. And it's the Saints offensive line going up against that Buffalo defensive line. We talked about the third down conversion rate and how, maybe those third and longs are still being given up. But if you can work yourself into some of those third and shorts, you're better off as an offense having, more of your playbook available to you and things like that. And so I think in particular, the offensive line for New Orleans, which could have Taliesin Fuanga back at right tackle, which we're expecting Trevor Penning to make his debut at left guard. He's now played left tackle, right tackle. Now he's moving to left guard here in the 2025 season. If those guys are able to pave the way a little bit in the running game in the first and second down opportunities, it's going to allow Kellen Moore to play more of his mixed down football that he likes to play. He wants you to not be able to know necessarily that this is a passing down versus this is a run down. He wants to be able to kind of have that full playbook available to him. And a team so far on the offensive side of the football that's created, Joe, just 0.71 yards before contact in the run game. 0.71 yards. Number 28 in the NFL, going up against a vulnerable rushing defense in Buffalo, maybe one of their only vulnerabilities, aside from that third down defense. That's a spot where I think the Saints have to be able to exploit. They have to be able to come out on top. And that goes back to what we opened the show talking about with the sustained drives. If you can run the football, you have a better opportunity to sustain those drives. I think that's where this kind of starts and ends for New Orleans, because they're yet to score an opening drive touchdown. They're yet to get off to a fast start. If they can control their offense a little bit and control possessions a little bit with that run game, then maybe they'll get into some better opportunities there.
I think it's a great call out, Ross. And when I think Saints offensive line, I think physical people movers, right? All of these guys, Banks, Ruiz, McCoy, if they get Fuaga back, Penning, like, you can have concerns about Penning, but he can move bodies at the line of scrimmage. And I think that's a fair call out, that the Bills are not a very consistent team in terms of run fits, and they can get displaced up front. They got some young defensive tackles that they're going to be playing, and TJ Sanders and Deion Walker, and that could obviously be a huge opportunity. I have one of my bold bets this year is that Alvin Kamara gets his first 1,000-yard rushing season. Okay, we're in on that. All right, I have that with Kyle Krabs on Locked On NFL Scouting, so I'm hoping to cash in on that one. And this could be a big game for Alvin Kamara to get some rushing production. I think that's a big part of the Saints script, is being able to control the game with their rushing offense, and I think there's an opportunity for them to do that. I do have a Saints offensive line talking point that intrigues me from a Bills perspective, and it's more pass rush oriented. And it is the young tackles. It's Kelvin Banks at left tackle, a top 10 pick, but it's start number 4 for him. Fuaga, you said his first name correctly, so I'm not going to try that. That sounded like that was pretty tough. But Fuaga there at right tackle, this would be his season debut, if I'm not mistaken.
He was there for the first 2 games of the year.
2 games
of the year. He missed last week. So he
missed last week. So he's coming back off injury, and Joey Bosa's been hot. Yeah, right. Man. And we all concerned about, when the injury is going to come for Bosa, but it hasn't come yet. And he's looking really, really strong. And then you have Greg Rousseau, who's the other pass rusher in Buffalo off the edge, and just got paid the new contract, $20 million a season. And he's been a little quiet here to start the season. And I think this is a big opportunity for Buffalo to take advantage of some one-on-one matchups against some young tackles with some experience, paid veteran, first-round pick defensive lineman off the edge to put some heat on Spencer Rattler, get those negative plays, and put the Saints in some disadvantageous situations offensively.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a big part. Look, people don't like to talk about it, but Kelvin Banks and Taliesin Fuang have struggled this season. I mean, they have allowed, they're the guys that are in the lead in terms of pressure allowed. Everybody's been critical of the Saints' interior offensive line, but really a lot of the pressures come from the edge. And the only reason why the sack numbers might not be there for the Saints on offense is because of how quickly Spencer Rattler gets the ball out of his hands. 2.49 seconds is his average right now. He's one of the fastest throwers in the league out of the 30 quarterbacks with 50 plus passing attempts so far this season. So really the only thing that's kept pressure off of him is how quickly they've dialed up the scheme to get the ball out of his hands. And I think that's going to be, something to really watch in this one, because if you get the pressure on him there and you force him to hold the football, I mean, that's going to take away some of these opportunities and the dynamic opportunities that this offense could have downfield, which they've not been able to take advantage of so far this season. Joe, I'll take us back to the run game real quick and go over to the Saints defense. I think one of the other big matchups that I'm going to be watching are the Saints linebackers, particularly Demario Davis and Pete Werner. Although, watch for number 44, Isaiah Stalbert, a guy that got mixed in early on in the game last week up against Seattle. Saints are starting to get a look at some of their young guys. It's evaluation season here in New Orleans, so they're getting some of those guys out there, rookie Quincy Riley and all that as well. But those guys and their ability to fit the run going up against the league's best rushing offense. And in my opinion, Joe, so far this year, the best running back in the NFL is James Cook, in my opinion. And so they're going to be going up against this guy who can take every option that's available to him in the zone run game and turn it into an enormous chunk play. And this Saints rushing defense has not had much going for it. The numbers look really good. 3.6 yards per carry allowed so far. That's pretty solid. That's top 10 in the NFL. Their yards after contact, yards before contact are some of the best that we've seen so far. But they've also been in situations where they've been playing with a deficit. And so the run game is not meant to attack in certain ways. In some ways, it's just meant to kind of run the clock. And the Saints have been at detriment from that quite a bit. So I think that's going to be a big piece that I'm also going to be watching, is kind of the run game on the opposite side, because if Buffalo controls this game, then the Saints are completely outclassed.
Ross, it's a great call out by you. It's something I had down to get into as well, where you think Josh Allen and the Bills and throwing the ball, it's not really who they've been. Under Joe Brady, this team was top 5 in run rate, and they're right back in that spot again this season. They're a two-dimensional offense, and so they're going to pound the football, and they have a very, very unique run scheme. They run a lot of 12 and 13 personnel, 2 and 3 tight ends on the field all the time, and they got this rookie, Jackson Hawes, who is an unbelievable run blocker that, last year the toast of the Bills' run scheme was that they played this jumbo offensive lineman. Alec Anderson is like the big tight end. He's really a guard center type player. And now they don't need him anymore. They have Jackson Hawes, and he has stepped into the NFL and has very quickly become a special run blocking tight end. And so you're in draft. Oh man, every team should have got him. He's so foundational to what you can be in as a run scheme. And so you're in 12 and 13 personnel. It means you're introducing a ton of extra gaps to a defense to defend, while you also have James Cook, who thrives in the zone rushing scheme. He's number 2 in success rate on zone runs this season, but it's the cutbacks that he's able to find. You won't see a run scheme anywhere that sets up cutback opportunities for their running back like Buffalo does. And he rips off these huge runs all the time. It's crazy. Right. So you have extra gaps. You have really good perimeter blockers. You have a great zone runner in James Cook. Oh, by the way, Josh Allen's your quarterback, so you're always +1 in their run game. So it's a tough order to deal with this Bills run scheme. And so you might think Josh Allen throwing the ball, but they're going to want to come in and set the tone with their rushing offense.
Yeah, 100%. The Saints haven't had to play all 11 on defense or going up against an offense since the opening game with Kyler Murray at quarterback. Since then, they faced Mac Jones and Sam Darnold. Going up against Josh Allen, it's an entirely different task.
All right. We're going to next focus in on what each team needs to do to win this football game. What's the winning script? We'll tell you what it is for both sides here on the other side of it. So, folks, be sure to stick with us. The NFL season is back, and honestly, there is nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest about it. Getting tickets can be a hassle between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout. It is frustrating, and that's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Game Time is fast, it's easy, and it's backed by the Game Time Guarantee. You're always going to get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. Ross, you remember a couple weeks ago, I sent you a text message. I said, Ross, I'm stuck in Buffalo. And I need to get home, but I couldn't get home. My flight was delayed 28 hours. You know what I needed? Last-minute tickets to Bills-Ravens. You know what I found? Last-minute tickets to Bills-Ravens right there at the airport. And you know what was important to me was like my view from where I sit. I wanted to sit in the 300 level, but I wanted to be on row one. I didn't want anyone standing up in front of me the whole game. So I made sure I got that seat. And with the seat view that you get on Game Time where you can see your view, you know you're going to be where you want to be in the stadium. And I love that. It's just faster, it's cheaper, and it's less stressful than any other way that I've purchased tickets. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Joe Marino from Locked On Bills, joined by Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints. We're now going to focus our conversation on what each team needs to do to win this football game. I have 3 things down. I'm sure Ross does as well. Your top key for Saints to get this dub.
Yeah, I would say that the dub is very different for New Orleans, right? The dub
you seemed uncomfortable there, Ross.
Yeah. The dub isn't necessarily getting a win, although that would send shockwaves through New Orleans in a way that like everybody here would love. Do not get me wrong. So we know any given Sunday is definitely a thing. But for me, the idea of winning is to show that you can be competitive against one of the NFL's best teams, regardless of what the result of the game is. And so for me, I think the first thing is not beat yourself. And that's something that the New Orleans Saints have done quite a bit. They've been penalized a ton. They've been penalized on third downs where they would otherwise be getting off the field, which is always frustrating. They have had the special teams issues. They've had other issues that have kind of been them shooting themselves in the foot. So the first thing they got to do, Joe, is play the opponent, not play the opponent and themselves. I think that's the first thing they've got to get figured out is cleaning up some of those disciplinary issues, procedural issues, pre-snap penalties when they're trying to do tempo and motion and keep their offense, kind of the easy buttons going. And then, some foolish penalties as well, like some unnecessary roughness things and stuff like that. Like the extracurriculars need to be cut out. You're not a good enough team for that kind of stuff. And so that's got to be the first thing that this team has to do is not create an additional opponent for themselves on Sunday.
One of the hard truths in the NFL is accepting that games are lost more than they are won. So don't beat yourself. And I think once teams kind of figure that out, that's when you can kind of find your stride and mature as a football team. And it takes time, right? This is game 4 under Kellen Moore. So obviously some growing pains there. For me with the Bills, it really just comes down to, number one, playing sound situational defense, third downs and red zone. We talked about it in segment 1. The Dolphins got into 15 third downs. The Bills allowed them to convert 10 of them. You got to get off the field on third downs. And then you got to be able to stop teams in the red zone. So far, the Bills have allowed 5 touchdowns and 7 trips to the red zone. And it's 71%. That's 27th in the NFL. The Bills are going to be a serious Super Bowl contender. They got to be able to play better third down defense, and they have to be able to stop teams in the red zone, which is structurally how their defense is set up. Like they're going to play a lot of too high coverage shells. They're going to give you some light boxes. They're going to invite you to say, hey, if you can string 10, 11, 12 plays together and them all be positive, you're going to have a good chance to score, but we're going to tighten the screws in the red zone. We're going to introduce some variance. The Bills are very good at taking away the football. Sean McDermott, this is crazy, 12 years in a row, top 10 in percentage of defensive drives that end and a takeaway. That's not normally sustainable, Ross.
No.
You know, ball. It's 12 years in a row. With Sean McDermott, it is. We assume that it's going to happen. So the problem with that formula is you got to stop teams in the red zone, and you got to stop them on third down. And right now, it's been a problem that's lingering into another season.
Yeah, that's an incredible stat, like shockingly so. Wow. I think the next thing for New Orleans is that they've got to be prepared for this game. It's going to be on full display very quickly if they come in as underprepared as they came in up against the Seattle Seahawks. This team has not gotten an interception yet this season. This team has not scored on its first possession yet this season. This team was scoreless through the first quarter as well. And so the Saints have to get this stuff figured out to where they're impacting the football on the defensive side by knowing what it is that they need to do to match up with an opposing offense. They need to get their offense rolling and take advantage of the incredible speed and explosion that they do have at the wide receiver position, which only one receiver so far for the Saints, and let me say pass catcher for the Saints so far, averages more than 10 yards per catch so far this season. And it's tight end Jack Stoll, who had a 13-yard catch last week and had one other 10-plus yard catch in another week. That's it. And so the Saints have got to start taking advantage of the talent that they have downfield. And in order to do that, you got to come in prepared and know how to be able to take advantage of this. You can't come in every week and say after the game, well, the defenses took this away when you played 3 different defenses who have attacked you 3 different ways and have played 3 different types of coverages against you and taken your big play position, taking your big play potential away. At some point, the common denominator is actually the issue. And so I'd like to see the Saints get a little bit better there.
You know, every zone coverage eventually becomes man coverage. And I promise you, the Bills don't have a single player that can run with Chris Olave. So he went up to that guy. right. Or I saw his yards per catch is like 9 or something like that. I didn't know if he was coming back off injury and he didn't have the juice back, but
nope, just despicable. It's just despicable in terms of the usage.
I've been texting you about him for years. I'm like,
yep.
When's he freed up? When can he get the ball? Number 2 for me is zero panic. You just can't have zero panic in this game. It's game 4 of the Kellen Moore era. It's a quarterback. I know this is a Ross Jackson stat that has never won a start, right? He's 0-9 and Spencer Rattler. This is year 9 of Sean McDermott. It's year 8 of Josh Allen. He's the NFL MVP. And, look, you just don't need to have any panic. I go back to the Broncos playoff win that the Bills had last year in the wild card round. Broncos got the ball first, and they hit a bomb to Troy Franklin. It was a touchdown, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, geez, like, is this going to happen right now? And then you play the rest of the game. The Bills win 31-7. They score 31 unanswered points in the playoffs. Like, your maturity as a football operation has to shine in this type of game where you are just simply a deeper, more talented roster that's at home. Play your game. Don't panic. Maybe they make a play. Maybe Chris Olave catches a bomb. Maybe there's a reverse to Rashid Shaheed. Maybe there's a special teams thing that goes the Saints' way. Just keep playing and dare the Saints to outscore you for 60 minutes, and I don't think they can.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a really good one. I mean, you have to maintain your composure no matter what it is that goes down. The Saints is a young team. We're learning that. Obviously, a veteran team needs to be able to do that as well. I think my last one here is that the Saints need to get Chase Young back out on the football field, and he needs to have an impact. He can't be a player that comes back and then doesn't, make some kind of a difference. Last year, according to our friends over at True Media, the Saints pressure percentage ticked up 7%. The Saints sack percentage ticked up 2% with Chase Young on the field versus when he was off the field. Those aren't massive moves, but they would be massive for where the Saints are right now as one of the worst teams in the NFL in generating pressure. They're second to last in the league. And so with a 7% boost, they'd at least be ahead of like the Cincinnati Bengals in the 31.5% range. And that would put them around 24-ish. And so I think that this would be a great game for the Saints to get Chase Young back and for him to show some kind of impact. The Saints had 39 sacks last season. 31 of them happened with Chase Young on the field. It's not just about what he produces. It's about the attention that he could potentially draw and allow some other guys to produce. Last week, he wasn't on the field. The Seattle Seahawks clued in and really focused in on Carl Granderson, who's the other top edge rusher, along with Cam Jordan. They focused on taking Carl Granderson out of the game. No sacks for the Saints team for the first time this season after starting off with 8 second in the NFL through the first 2 weeks. So I think Chase Young coming back would be huge, but Chase Young coming back and having some kind of impact would bring them a little bit closer to being that competitive team.
And obviously a pretty big commitment to Chase Young with the contract extension. And we know that every dollar with the Saints and the cap situation and what it's been matters a ton. And so there needs to be return on that investment. Last one for me, Ross, is to expect the unexpected. This is a team that got smoked last week that has a young coach that's looking to prove himself as a leader. And I expect him to work hard to galvanize this team and to put some things into this game plan that helps them steal possessions, right? There could be some trick plays. There could be some special teams fakes. The Bills have to play a smart football game against a team that I think is going to come out trying to swing. We know that your team like the Bills, every game that you play is a measuring stick for that opponent, especially a young team like this. So I think there's going to be a lot of potential for some of those opportunities that the Saints will look to steal a possession, and the Bills need to be ready and disciplined for those types of moments.
Love that.
All right, folks. Well, this has been a blast getting ready for this game with Ross Jackson. Folks, I hope that you'll continue to stay dialed in on coverage from both Locked On Bills and Locked On Saints all week as we get you ready for the game. And then, of course, as we break it down afterwards. So, as always, we kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to catching up with you again real soon.